get this thing up and running. I think we're golden. I think we got people starting to log in here on a beautiful Tuesday evening, and I'm in Minnesota, and it's snowing outside and just lovely here. You know, we're going to talk spring transition, and we got more snow here. Hard to imagine, but it wouldn't be the Midwest, wouldn't be Minnesota if we didn't see some of that in the month of April. So we'll get dialed in here and get rocking and rolling. And I know many of us have been at home for a while, myself included. I have found my humble abode inside my 12-year-old son's bedroom. This has been my office for the last 3 weeks, and this is where I'll be talking to all of you today. So let's see if I can get this screen popping up here. All right, let's go here. Gonna go hide this. Got a few more people logging in, and we'll get rolling. Make sure everyone can hear me okay, which I think they can. Looks like that's dialed in. Welcome, everybody. Gonna talk spring fishing here in about a minute. There we go. Now we're up and at 'em. Perfect. Alrighty, well, let's get rocking and rolling and start talking spring tactics. And how I like to do things with any seminar I've ever run is I'm going to do my best to answer questions, and what I can easily do. Yeah, it looks like I can go back through here and check these questions out and try my best to answer them. Otherwise, you can always follow up on Navionics Facebook page. I know they have an event and a post for this specific seminar. And at that time, I'll definitely follow back up and check any questions that are on there as well. So if I don't hammer down a question or I miss one here, please don't be offended. What we'll do is we'll go back through and answer those at another given time. So for starters, is everyone that is logged on can hear me fine? Audio is good. I don't know if anyone, maybe somebody could just pop in with a question, say I can hear. Everything's good to go. I believe everything's working on my end, but it's always nice to get a little bit of feedback to make sure. This is my first time doing a webby. All good. Thanks, Jackie, the man. Audio is good, sweet, and you can see the PowerPoint as well. Everything looks good. You can see that monster Metro bass I'm holding up. Perfect. All right. Awesome. Well, let's rock and roll. So, like I said, I like to always make sure people know that there's an open forum for asking questions. I get excited about fishing, sometimes get long-winded and tend to go on for a while. But what I'll do is go through this anytime I ask questions, and we'll hammer down. So spring transition, I want to really hit on some important things to remember as we start our open water season. For some of you, you may be down south. You may have been fishing in a boat for months, if not for all year. Up here in the Midwest, we just had ice come off. In northern parts of Minnesota, there's still ice. So I want to make sure you're dialed in on some things that you should be doing to get ready for the spring fishing season, and just some angler checklist stuff. Of course, we want to talk about locational strategies. That seems to be a big one in the springtime, is where are the fish, what are they doing, that sort of stuff. And then we got to talk baits. So we're definitely going to talk angler lure selection, things that I think would work well. I did get some requests during the process of promoting this seminar about just touch on crappies a little bit, and I plan to do that. So, you know, I do a lot of bass fishing in the metro area of Minnesota, but I do spend a lot of time chasing panfish and crappies. So I plan to touch on crappies a little bit as well, just so if you're here in Minnesota specifically, you can't fish for bass yet, not for several weeks. So hopefully I can dial you in on some crappie ideas to get going as well. Otherwise, we will definitely hammer home on bass. So get things started. Let's see here. A little bit about myself. I figured you may want to know who I am if you haven't met me or we haven't crossed paths. I love talking to people, love talking fishing. If you see me at a sport show, come up and say hi. If you see me at a boat ramp, come say hi. I'll probably tell you how I'm catching the fish and what to do. So I'd be more than happy to do that at any given time. But I've been a fishing guide and a promoter here in the Twin Cities area, Minnesota, since about 2002. So when I went to college, I decided to get involved in fishing pretty heavily to help financially support from an income perspective. So, and I've been guiding ever since. I guide year round, ice fishing, open water, love to get anglers on the water, love to get anglers on the ice, show them some things, teach them some things. That's my biggest emphasis, is the educational side of things. Obviously, we want to catch some fish, but I really want to get anglers on the water or on the ice to learn something. I want you to leave that day on the ice or day in the boat saying, you know what, I can do that too. It's one thing to go fishing with a good buddy that fishes a lot or a guide, catch some fish, and then go home and scratch your head and go, how the heck could I do that? I don't know what I did. I just grabbed a rod and he said, drop it down, and I caught a fish. Well, I like to make sure you can go home with that stuff. So that's important. My day job, when I'm not fishing, I guide about 70 times a year, 70 to 80 times a year. And if I'm not guiding, I'm a pro staff director for multiple phenomenal fishing brands. Clam Outdoors, if you ice fish, of course, you probably know Clam. They also launched a brand new net this year. It's phenomenal. Great all-purpose net in a variety of sizes. I'm also the pro staff director for Blackfish Gear. They make rain suits, soft shell clothing, UPF, you name it. We've been out for a few years now. I'm pro staff manager for All Terrain Bass Tackle. They make some of the best bass jigs and stuff you can find in the market. Super cool product. A big tooth muskie bait. So if you're a muskie angler and you start like catching giant fish with teeth that probably eat our bass and our bluegills and crappies that we like to fish, they make great muskie baits. And then I get to play with Ice Team and manage that group. Phenomenal group of anglers. We have a lot of great partners we work with, like Navionics. Navionics is a partner of Ice Team, has been for years. And I get to manage all those fun assets and educate all the ice anglers out there as well. Married to a beautiful, my wife Tara, and we've been married for over 10 years. We have 4 awesome kids that are all fishing nuts. You can see Jack pictured there. That was his giant 10-plus pound eel pout we caught on Lake of the Woods. And my kids love to be in the boat, go fishing, play with tackle, and all that sort of stuff. So super cool, super fun. I love being involved with the kids, doing a lot of stuff to get these kids involved in the sport of fishing. They're our future. And tell you what, watching the advancements of social media with YouTube and Instagram and Snapchat and some of this TikTok, things I don't even know a lot about yet. You're watching these kids really grab this sport by the horn and take it to the next level. So kudos to any of the kids that are out there watching. I compliment you. I wish I had some of these tools at my fingertips when I was your age, and I'm envious. And it's pretty fun to watch you guys do what you're doing. So that's a little bit about me. Let's get on to the meat and potatoes of what this is all about. Angler checklist. So for me, the angler checklist is super important, and especially this time of year. And I think as anglers, we oftentimes get really driven, and then driven's a good thing. You want to be passionate and driven about this sport of fishing, but oftentimes we just start to do before we think. And it's human nature. I totally get it. I'm guilty of it too. But an angler checklist is something that we can take to heart. No matter the season, no matter the species, no matter the situation, you can always have a checklist. And yes, I literally mean at times a notebook, a piece of paper, something on your person that you can go back to and relate to and write down notes. I'm always in the boat. I'm always in the truck. I'm always at my desk. I'm talking to buddies where I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Great idea. Only to get home an hour later and go, what was that? What was that great idea? So literally start a list, especially your first few trips out on the lake. And the reason I say that is you always forget stuff. I don't care how prepared you are. You're going to get on the water for the first time, get to your first fishing spot and go, you know what? I didn't bring a pliers. you know what, I'm gonna have to put my hand in that northern pike's mouth that accidentally bit my crappie tube. So start a checklist. Keep it. What I'll do oftentimes is take a Post-it note and stick it to the dash of my boat, and I'll have a pen sitting there. I'll just set out of mind. I don't have to carry the notepad with me, but if I think of something, I can walk back over and write down on that Post-it note, I need electrical tape. I don't have any in the boat, and oftentimes I need it for a number of things, whether it's to repair a wire that happens, whether it's to tape up my finger because I got a cut. You never know. So things like that, just start paying attention, start a list. You want to start thinking about the necessary boat items that you need. When we transition here in the Midwest, we just got done with ice fishing mode. And all of our anglers are putting away their ice gear, putting stable in their ice augers, recharging batteries, organizing that stuff, toting up your ice armor clothing, and putting away for the season. So we don't always think about the things that we need to do to transition to this new season. So the necessary items for your boat, and this comes down to safety, things you have to have, your trailer. So you want to make sure you think of things like bumpers, throwable, fire extinguisher. Did you get a new boat? Did it come with one? Do you need to buy one? Check your local regulations for the state you're in and make sure that you have all the mandatory requirements. How many life jackets did you bring in the boat? Did you bring a net? You have your safety navigation lights. These are things you may take out of your boat and store in your garage in the off season. Make sure you have those sorts of things. First aid kit. There's a list of things, but again, keep track of this. I also navigate the perimeter of my trailer, and I do this throughout the entire season, not just before the spring season starts. Do my lights work? It's amazing what will happen in the off season. You put it away, shiny and new, and something, I think it's some kind of magic, whatever. During the off season, it seems like your trailer lights stop working. Your sonar stops working. Your transducer maybe got frozen up on where you stored it. Your kid might have climbed on the back of your boat in the garage during the wintertime to get a sled up in the rafters and broke something. Do a walk around your trailer, check the hubs, check the tires, just do some maintenance checks. Those are important things. Fishing gear. Now we're going to talk about fishing gear later on during this presentation, but you also want to take a look at things, simple things like your line. How old's your line? Did it sit in the rafters all winter? Did it change color? Is it brittle? Is it nicked up? A lot of times in the fall, it's the time of year where it's cold, and we put things away hastily, and we don't maybe pay attention to things as much as we do during the beginning of the season, at least in the Midwest. So it's cold out. You may not put things away the way you wanted. Now you might be dealing with those problems. So don't have the problem surface when you're on the water actually trying to fish. Take a look at that stuff now. Any chips or dings in your guides of your fishing rods, that can make a day very painful. You can break off on a very, very big fish. You can lose lures on casting. So check your guides. Tools, do you have all the tools you need? Go through a list, make sure all that stuff's there. Electronics, your motor. This is a big one. Don't troubleshoot issues at the boat launch if you can avoid it. Oftentimes we can avoid those situations. Now I get it, you may not have known about a problem, and that stuff happens. That stuff can happen in the middle of the season, but troubleshoot some of those things in your driveway. If you have a pair of muffs that can go over your motor, run a hose through it once we can get warm enough weather and see and make sure everything's working. If you're concerned about something not running right, try to troubleshoot that before you get in the water. Same thing with your electronics. Make sure everything works. Make sure it locks into signal. Make sure you can track your GPS. And if you know you need to fix something on the water, that's okay. Find a less pressured lake or access. I got in Lake Minnetonka, which is one of the most prestigiously famous or infamous lakes here in the Minnesota area. Probably Gray's Bay Access is not the place to troubleshoot your outboard one of your first times out. One, your anxiety levels are going to go through the roof because the 17 guys behind you waiting to get in are going to be yelling at you. And two, it's just probably not respectful if you know you have a problem to troubleshoot it on a busy access. Find a smaller lake, back out and troubleshoot that way. Bait organization. I'm big on being organized. If you're more organized, you can be more efficient and you can get more things done. Again, go back to your list. Start a list. Is your favorite color plastic gone? Is your favorite lure gone? You need more chatterbaits in this specific color. Start that list. Keep track of what you need. Don't forget your fishing license. That's a common one. There's sheriffs at every boat launch on Lake Minnetonka right now. They're all over the place. Make sure you have a fishing license. No excuse not to have a fishing license. Get the fishing license. Super easy. Most states will let you buy them online. Super painless. And then do your homework. Your Navionics app is your lifeline for me. I have the Navionics app on my phone. I'm always looking at that. I am networking with friends. I am talking to angling buddies, guide partners, whatever it might be. My son, use some of those tools at your fingertips and do your homework. Don't get in the water and scratch your head and go, where should I go fishing today? What should be my first spot? You're wasting time. Wasting time means you can't catch fish. So make sure you do your homework and check some of that stuff. So angler checklist, sometimes this stuff goes in, is over most of our heads, or we might already know it or have it dialed in, but it's good to remind ourselves. I don't care if you've been fishing for 1 month or 30 years. Start a checklist, make sure you're dialed in, and you'll be more productive on the water. All right. Let's see here. Let's go to the next slide. Perfect. There's my my middle boy Benny and his monster Metro pike. The Metro does have some big fish, so we caught that giant pike throwing a chatterbait last summer, pre-fishing for a bass tournament for these guys. But you never know what you're gonna catch. So here we go. Network with friends. This is a big one that's often overlooked, and I think it's super important to help take away the guesswork. And two, there's a sense of ease talking to buddies about your fish catches, what they caught, what works, what doesn't work. There's only so much you can do alone. Teamwork makes the dream work. You can go further as a team than you can by yourself. So network with your buddies. And here's some tips I have. Obviously, grow your network of angling buddies. That's important. Find friends that like to fish. Common interests. Do you like to bass fish? Do you find friends that like to bass fish? Social media. I'm a part of Minnesota Bass Heads. These guys and gals on this page are diehards. Most of them know more about bass fishing than I could ever dream, and they're super in tune. You can go on these social media pages and you can ask questions and get feedback about lure types, what's hot, what doesn't work, boats, technical problems, where the bites at, where the fish are at, what's water temperature. Use social media. We have these tools at our fingertips on our phones that we don't even realize the power behind them. So utilize some of those networks to become a better student of the game. Study the sport, always study the sport. Lake maps, navionics.com, you'll see we're gonna dive into that. I use the chart viewer all the time. Study spots, plan your spots, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Get a number of spots dialed in. Don't have 2 spots that you think you're gonna fish tomorrow. Unless you're that dialed in that you know that's where you're gonna catch them. Have a number of spots so that if spot A doesn't work, you can go to B. If B doesn't work, you can go to C. If A, B, and C don't work, you may decide, you know what, I know D and E are not going to work. I'm going to F. So study lake maps, study your Navionics app, and get dialed in for a game plan. Mark spots that you think look good. There's nothing wrong with marking a waypoint if you haven't been there yet. You may look at a map and zoom in on a piece of contour on your Navionics inside turn, the most beautiful looking piece of structure, and you may go, I'm going to fish that spot when I go out in the water today or tomorrow or the next day. Oh, you can mark a waypoint from inside your boat on the driveway. You can scroll your cursor over. I don't care what brand electronics you have. You can do that from in your driveway and mark some of these spots. You can also do it on your phone, your smart, your tablet, and you can have some of these things at your fingertips to plan ahead. You may have remembered an inside turn on a weed bed or a rock hump. Mark those spots so you're better prepared. So talking with fishing buddies is super cool because I can oftentimes look at my network of friends and text somebody and say, you know what, I'm going to go hit the West Metro. I haven't been out there in 3 weeks. What the water temp's like? You know, hey, better yet, this time of year, are the docks in at access X, Y, or Z? I learned this last week that the docks are not in at Maxwell Bay on Lake Minnetonka. They might be now, but they weren't last week. But you know what, on Grays Bay, they were. So those are things we can do to network with our buddies. So get that network of fishing buddies and don't be afraid to talk to them and build confidence in one another and have fun with it as well. I like to connect with the local DNR to figure out fish conditions. If there's a lake I want to try, you can check here, at least in the Midwest, lakes winter kill. Shallow lakes can winter kill. They can lose oxygen, all that sort of stuff. So you can start to pay attention to those sorts of things and look at conditions. And overall, just be prepared. It's super important. Make sure you're ready for a day on the water, day on the ice, and we'll catch more fish. So again, I talked about the different resources. The Navionics website, super cool. You can go there and learn about all the various products, get in tune with the latest and greatest map chips. You can register your cards so that you can figure out when updates come out, all that sort of stuff. You can do the chart viewer. Lots of cool features on that website. And then, of course, the boating app. I love that thing, use it all the time on my phone. There's so many features. That could be a whole nother webinar. There's so many features on that boating app on your phone to really dial in for a day on the water, to make the most out of your experience. So learn how those things work. You can sync to different devices. You can learn all about this stuff on that Navionics website. So use these resources at your fingertips, and you'll get the most out of them. There's a lot of great tools that you can use in this sort of stuff. So what I really wanted to show you a quick video here. It's 3 minutes long. This is something I really lean on to help understand how to navigate these different platforms. So this talks about using devices in your truck, from the transition of ice fishing to open water, the stuff that you have in your boat, your computer, your phone. This is a great series that Navionics put together of fishing strategies at home. Right now we're at home looking for things to do. These are great ways that you can one-up some of your odds at catching more fish. A quick video showing you some of the ways that I like to use some of these tools at my fingertips to be more effective. Sounds like I'm having audio problems with the video. No problem. What I'm going to do is go past that video. That video you can find. I apologize for the audio issues. That video you can find on the Navionics YouTube page if you want to watch it, and we'll go from there. So apologize for the technical difficulties, and we'll just move on with the rest of the presentation. So like I said, I'm really going to jump into really specific locations, ideas, how these fish transition from winter into spring, and then we can touch on late spring as well, and as these move into these spawning movements. And we're going to really hone in on primarily crappies and bass, and they're both kind of similar in many ways on how they navigate their migration for the springtime. So for starters here, all these snapshots and screenshots I got from the Navionics website. So I actually just zoomed in. This is Lake Minnetonka. This is where I spend a lot of my time guiding. And no, if you're a Lake Minnetonka diehard, I'm not going to share probably anything super intimate, but you'll get a pretty good idea of what these fish are doing. I've been out there already this year, and the pattern already has been consistent with what I think is going on. So for starters here, you can see a screenshot, and I'm going to show you why I did this. So I zoomed out. Yes, Lake Minnetonka is massive. It's big. And I think it's one of the largest lakes in Minnesota for shoreline feet. And it may not be the most acreage of body of water, but if you look at all the islands and stuff, there's a lot of shoreline, a lot of feet here on Lake Minnetonka. So what I did is I circled some areas that I want to key in on. And that's one thing you can do on any body of water. You can look at this overall map and really try to dial in where you want to fish. You're going to get a little, or you may get a little intimidated if you don't practice this, because there's so much water to fish. So I circled some areas, and we're going to zoom in on a couple of them to show you. So for starters here, you can see I'm going to pick the area there next to Black Lake, the middle one, right there in the middle of the screen. It's a small section of water in between the lines, and that's what we're going to hone in on first. So go to that. So you can see we zoomed in on a piece of, on a portion of the lake. And what I'm going to do is show you kind of what I would do here from a transition perspective. So during winter, all these fish are out in Main Lake, or they're in the deeper holes and they're pooling up. So what I do is I focus on areas where the fish might stage, where the water starts to get warmest, where there might be bait fish, where there might be an influx of water or something to that effect. So the most of these channels tend to hold fish. When they start locating towards immediate first breaks. Now we're talking low 40-degree water temp, mid 40s. That's when these bluegills, crappies, and even your largemouth bass are going to start to stage in these areas, in these not quite way up shallow yet. They're going to be in that 8 to 15 or even 10 to 25 feet of water. Right there on those edges is where they're going to sit. And that's where they're going to hold for a period of time till the water starts to warm up. That surface temp starts to feel warm. When you start getting warmer days, that's when these fish start to make more substantial movements. So for now, they're kind of staging, and that's where they're going to sit. We've seen them move shallower just recently as well here because the water temps start to warm up and we started getting those 50s and 60-degree sunny days, and it pushes fish shallow. They can do that literally in one day, make movements up shallow. So this is where I find most of these fish staging. You know, when we have this what called cool water period again, where the ice comes off the lake and we're in the 40-degree water temps. We'll move to the next slide. As things warm up, you'll see I'm circling a different set of spots. Now you got warmer water temps. You've got fish starting to really look at the spawn. They're starting to locate up shallower. The water temps in these back channels are now getting into the low to mid 50s, and these fish move and migrate again up into these shallow channels, shallow bays, shallow back cuts, shallow shorelines, where you'll noticeably see a change in temperature. If you're watching your Lowrance or you're watching your temperature gauge, you will actually see a change in temperature. If you sit out there on the main lake portion and navigate into one of these back channels, you will literally see your water temp go from 48, 49, 50, 51, 51 and a half, 52, 53. You know you're onto something. These fish are going to find that warmer water and they're going to get in after it. So focus on that and find that warmer water. Springtime is really important for me, where I'm really paying attention to water temperature. I may not care as much about water temperature in the summertime or that sort of thing, but in the springtime, water temperature is king. Start paying attention where the warmest water is, and that's where you're gonna find the most activity. And that goes for crappies and that goes for bass. So find that warmer water, follow their transition out or in to that shallower water. Here's another snapshot I gave you here. So you can see more of a main lake spot, a lot more deeper water nearby. You're seeing these fish are relating to closer to offshore structure, but it's still structure. Right when the ice comes off, these fish are going to be staging off some of these break lines, underwater points, underwater pieces of structure, inside turns. They're not quite shallow. They may have moved in from the basin where you might have caught your crappies all winter long, but now they're moving up towards weed lines and those sorts of spots. And you can find these crappies and find those bass in that 10 to 20 foot range, and that's where they're cruising. That's where we generally fish our crappies, right when the water or the ice comes off, is in some of these areas before they move up. So these are good transition areas. These are areas that you may want to check if you're out fishing right now when the water's still cold. We got some snow the last couple days. Things cooled off again. Things are resetting back for that initial spring movement. You may slide back out and find these fish on the first break near where you find them in these shallow sloughs and back bays. So check that first break, see what those fish are doing. Pay attention to your electronics, mark fish, stay active and move around. These fish are going to school up. You're not going to catch one fish with nothing else in the area. So pay attention and look at some of these spots. And then again, we go to the next slide. You'll see here, now they transition, they move up. Those water temps start to hit 50 degrees or so. They move into these shallow spots where they're going to find warm water, comfort, forage, might get prepared for the spawn, all that sort of stuff. And they start to get dialed in here. I want to make sure I'm not missing any questions. And I think I'm in good shape here as they pop through. It looks like everything's showing good here. Let me make sure. All right. Perfect. And so we move into these shallow spots. These fish will hold there. I can catch fish there probably late April through May, and even late May, they'll still hold. As that water really starts to warm up, they move out of there. They don't like that really warm, stagnant water. The masses will move out there. The bigger fish will move out. But we got a ways to go before we have to worry about that. So now through the middle of May, at least, even Memorial Weekend, you're going to find fish utilizing some of these shallower spots, shallower bays, and go from there. And this is where you'll see these crappies sit. If you get a really warm day, even right now where it warms up into the 60s and high sun, you'll see fish make big moves into the back of these channels. I'm talking the very, very back nook and cranny. That's where some of these fish will slide into. So these are good spots you want to look at. And they're also out of the wind. So when you're dealing with colder conditions than you're used to, wind off of 48-degree water is cold. Even if it's 65 degrees outside and it's windy, you got to remember that water is in the 40s or maybe 50. So when the wind hits that water, you're going to feel that cooler breeze. And we always take that for granted. You're sitting in the driveway and you're like, oh, it's a sweatshirt, shorts and sweatshirt weather. You get on the boat and you learn the hard way and you realize, you know what, it's pretty darn cold out here where you might want bibs or pants. So take that for granted, or don't take that for granted. I mean, dress accordingly so you're in this springtime fishing, you can stay on top of fish and be more productive. So let's see here. Moving on. Crappie fishing. So I did want to touch on crappies a bit. I know there was some questions that already came into me via Facebook. Did you touch on crappies? We know that you like to fish crappies a lot, Matt. And so, yes, I'm going to touch on crappies just a little bit here, and we'll go from there. So let me just double check here. I think I'm navigating this. The questions all right. We can hear. Okay. Sorry, apologize. I'm still learning the webinar series. So I think everybody is good. Let me still hold. Are they in there messing with the bass? Absolutely, for sure. They're up there. Let me see if I can see a little more of this question window. All right, let me see. Okay, now I apologize. I'm learning the webinar thing. Now I can see these questions. Man, I see you guys couldn't hear the sound. Yep, I get it. All right. Are you looking for close contour lines prior to the moving shallow? Absolutely. So I'm looking for breaks. The question was, are you looking for close contour lines prior to the shallow migration? So to touch on location quick, the answer to that would be absolutely. I'm looking for abrupt breaks, oftentimes next to, if there's weeds will continue to hold oxygen, will continue to hold fish. And that's the same thing to the ice all the way to now. So I do look for abrupt contour lines, and I pay attention to my electronics. Sometimes you'll see these fish suspended staging out deeper, and those fish are key. If I can cast at those fish and stay on top of them, I'll definitely get it. So absolutely, I'm looking at those contour lines nearby. Let's see what else we got here. What are you using to catch these crappies early spring? A variety of things. I'm going to go over some presentations here on crappies right after I talk about tactics. So I will go through some tactics here. Thanks, Aaron. That's a great question, and hopefully I get that answered for you here in no time. So let's talk crappie tactics. They stage deep, like I said. They're in their winter locations. They move up into the first set of circles I showed you, immediate edges from shallow locations. And then as the water warms up, they make those shallow migrations. That's when they move in. Oftentimes it's temperature driven. Like I said, once the water temps are warm, you can actually follow the warmer temperature. And as you follow the warmer temperature, you will find a more active bite and more fish. They also go there because of a variance amount of food, comfort, warmth, you name it, they're in there. It's booming, and that's what drives these fish up shallow. A lot of people think they're making that move right now to spawn. They're not. They're making that move because of food and comfort. They will spawn at a later time. There's not many crappies right now spawning. That's going to come here in the coming weeks, but right now they're just doing this for comfort. They haven't felt that warm sun in a while. They've been under a sheet of ice, at least here in the Midwest, and they're making some of those movements up shallow. Then you have the spawn. As things start to warm up in the mid to upper 50s, these crappies will start to spawn, usually around shallow wood, shallow cover, inside dock lines, all that sort of stuff is in main lake reed beds. That's when they're spawn, and that's when you can find some of the really good activity. Once we get into these mid 50-degree temperatures, that's when things start to really go crazy. And I'll tell you what, some of the best fishing you can have all year is during that crappie spawn, because the action is fast and furious. You don't need to be a highly skilled angler to catch them. You can just get after them and chase down some of these fish. And then after the spawn, they kind of have a holding pattern where they kind of linger and mingle in the weeds. The weeds start to blossom and flourish, especially in lakes with milfoil. The crappies are still there. And then they start to slide towards that immediate weed line again. This is their outward migration before the summer pattern, and that's where I can catch them again on these outside weed lines. I can get these fish to go, and that can be a great time to catch fish. They put on the feed bags. There's about a week to 10-day window where they kind of get sluggish after the spawn, and then they start to eat again and they start to chow. But again, like I said, pay attention to water temperature. It's key. It's crucial. And I'll tell you what, pan fishing bring out the best in us. They bring out the kid in us. So why not bring the kids to catch the panfish? I encourage you to bring the entire family chasing crappies. It's fast and furious. There's nothing like watching a bobber go down, especially on a big slab. They fight hard, fishing with ultralight and light action rods, and you can have a lot of good time chasing bluegills and crappies. And they taste phenomenal. And they're great in the live well for kids to be entertained. So oftentimes we put crappies in the live well. My boys play around with them, and they get geeked out over that sort of stuff. So crappie fishing, great time of year, is coming. The next few weeks is a phenomenal time to catch these crappies. Springtime is awesome. So make sure you're doing that. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the crappie presentations that I'm using. And one thing I always preach about right away is, real quick, I make sure there's no more questions. Matt asked about summertime crappies. Yep, so what I do is find these fish on the outside weed lines and deeper. They're more basin fish or tight in the weeds at summertime. Deep dock lines catch a lot of crappies, and I cruise around and look for the deepest stretch of docks, back off, floating rafts. If there's a floating raft, it's amazing how many crappies you can catch at by that floating raft all summer long. Otherwise, deep break lines, the deep weeds on lakes like Minnetonka, they're in the coontail as well, just like the bass. And I tend to look a little deeper for my crappies in the summertime. So let's get back to thinking about springtime and what I do to catch these fish. Think small right away. A lot of anglers put away their ice fishing stuff. And I'll tell you, that's a big no-no. Keep your ice fishing stuff. You can see on the screen down there on the bottom, I got one of my favorite springtime panfish jigs. It's the drop kick jig. It's a tungsten jig from Clam Outdoors. It's an ice fishing jig. I totally get it. But when I was out last week chasing crappies with my boys, that's what I caught most of my fish on. And I'm not talking just little fish. Our 1-pounders that we caught came on that jig. I'm using a size 8. You can also use a size 10, but I'm using a size 8 tungsten panfish jig for the ice. Tungsten is awesome in the boat as well because you don't need to add split shot. Tungsten's heavier, so it drops down. So I don't need the split shot there as well. I can use that tungsten and get away with it. And then I'm fishing under a float. So think small. Don't put away the ice fishing jigs. Don't put away the ice fishing plastics. They will catch bluegills and crappies right away when the ice comes out. In fact, they'll catch crappies all summer long. So I always got a jig box with me and a bag of plastics from my summertime arsenal. So my tungsten jigs, my Mackie plastics, those don't leave my side pretty much the entire time. So I'm always using those to catch panfish throughout the entire summer months as well. Floats versus jigging or pitching. That's a common question I get at all my seminars when I'm talking panfish. You know, in the springtime, I like to use floats if I can get away with it because these fish are not as aggressive. They're not chasing down baits. You might notice on the screen here, I didn't put a beal spin. I didn't put a roadrunner. I didn't put an inline spinner. I'm not crushing crappies on those type of high octane movement baits at springtime. I'm using something soft and subtle, glide baits, something that gives a little bit of a thump, something that gives a little more action, but I don't need to rip it through the water column horizontally or vertically. So I use smaller presentations, and that's why I really like a float. And I use that mini fill. I got a picture there, and I put a BB on each side, a split shot on each side of that bobber so that I can pin the bobber in one spot, but I also give it castability. And with those BBs, it helps keep that bobber neutrally buoyant in the water column. So when that light biting crappie just picks it up and moves with it, like they love to do at springtime, I can see those fish and I can set the hook. I'm not fishing a slip float. I'm not fishing super deep. If I'm fishing a float this time of year, I'm probably in under 6 or 7 feet of water. So I don't need to use a slip bobber. I can get away with a peg float, and that mini fill is awesome. I use the largest size. And wow, does it work wonders on these fish. I'm using my ice fishing setup, my tungsten jig, my Mackie plastic, and away I go. But I will pitch a lot of jigs. So if I'm catching my fish on those first spots I showed you, the transition areas where they're still on the weed lines, I'm probably not fishing a float. I'm probably using a jig head like you see pictured below as well. And that happens to be a tungsten jig head. That's the Drop TG from Clam. I use a 16th ounce. It is a super sharp hook. I like the way that hook keeper is, or the plastics keeper. It's not big, balled up piece of lead, gaudy material that rips your plastic. It's a tungsten jig with a fine wire plastics keeper. I can thread on small plastics. It doesn't rip them and holds them in its place. So if I'm fishing a tube, a twister tail, a minnow bait, any of the baits you see pictured, I can use that jig and I can cast that thing a long ways. I can keep contact with the bottom. I can fish it in windy conditions. So yes, I'm oftentimes also pitching a jig. And if I'm fishing a deeper dock line, I might be pitching a jig. If I'm fishing a deeper channel like I might do this time of year, I'm probably pitching a jig. So I do use both setups. And if you come into my boat, let's say we went fishing tomorrow, you would see multiple jig rods and multiple bobber rods because you don't know what the day is going to throw at you, and it's better to be prepared. So I may come into an area and fan cast with the jig. If I set the hook on a fish or miss a bump, I may slow down and throw that bobber approach. And then when I get back into a really narrow corridor or channel where it's shallow water and it's stagnant and the water is warmer, I'll turn to that float and I'll get after them. You can turn to small swim baits. You can turn to small spinners and go from there to catch some of these fish as well. So, but I oftentimes use the small spinners and the small swim baits and things like that, the reaction baits to cover water, and then hone in on a bobber and a smaller jig, smaller plastic approach. That plastic in the upper right corner there is the Mackie XL minnow. I love that thing. I can trim it down to make it smaller, but it also works well as the size it is, and it catches a pile of fish. It's got a lot of action in the water. I can literally let it sit, and just the natural movement of water, there's always current under the water, whether you think there's or not, gets that tail to dance, and I can entice those fish to bite. I'm not a live bait fisherman. I usually fish plastics probably 100% of the time when I'm fishing bluegills and crappies, and that goes ice fishing and open water fishing. I'm always using plastics. I've built confidence in plastics, and I think in open water it's something that works well too. I can increase the size of the fish I'm catching. I can be more efficient. I'm not dealing with minnows. I'm not dealing with things like that. However, if I bring the kids out fishing, I just want them to catch fish, I may throw a little dainty crappie minnow on there, or I may pack that ice jig with maggots. It still catches fish, and it's productive for the kids. If they're going to be tinkering around and not paying attention to things as much, you can get away with live bait. But if I'm fishing, I'm using plastics, and I'm getting after them, and I'm chasing them down, and I'm doing it that way. So a lot of great ways to catch crappies. I love fishing crappies this time of year. It's an underutilized fish. I think a lot of guys and gals fish it because they can't fish bass this time of year. But I would encourage you to regroup and target crappies on and off throughout the entire summer season. You can have some phenomenal bites. They are very plentiful. They taste wonderful. If you're beating your head against the wall trying to catch a bass or a walleye or a muskie, switch gears, grab the panfish rods, and it's amazing how much fun you can have chasing bluegills and crappies all season long. But right now here in the Midwest, let's say actually specifically Minnesota, we have no choice but to fish crappies and bluegills. So hopefully some of these tips on catching crappies can help you get out there and chase down some fish and be more aggressive on how you're catching some of these crappies and have a good time. And share some pictures. I want to see some pictures. Hop on that post on the Navionics Facebook page. Show some of your crappie pictures. I want to see them. Tell me how you caught some of your fish. And we can work on catching fish together and building that network, right? So we can work on growing a network of fishing buddies so that we can all get out there and chase down more fish and be more effective. Next, all right, let's get talking a little back to bass. Bass strategies, bass tactics, same thing, staging locations. These fish are going to stage in similar spots like you saw on the map. They're going to hold there. This is the time of year, at least in Minnesota, we really can't target them, but that's where they are. If you go to Wisconsin, it's a catch and release bass season right now. You can do it. If you go down to Iowa, or if you're fishing in other parts of the country, you can chase down some of these fish, and you can really catch them on those staging spots. I tend to fish slower. When I can fish bass, if I'm over in Wisconsin, I'm going to fish slower right now because these fish are lethargic. They just came off a what most anglers would say, dormant season during the winter, where they're literally just sitting. You have to catch them with tiny jigs. They're not super aggressive. The acrobatic fish we catch all summer long is now their metabolism is slowing down. So they're starting to pick up the feed bag, starting to get a little more hungry, but I'm still slowing down my approach. I'm not chasing them down with crazy topwater buzz baits. I'm not, burning baits back to the boat as much. I'm using baits that provide vibration, provide noise, change direction, get their attention in other ways versus speed. So keep that in mind. So vibration and noise is important. It's super cool this time of year to play with some of these baits that kick out some different noises, different crankbaits, and catch some of these fish. Don't be afraid to downsize. and finesse some of these fish. You know, there's oftentimes these bass will eat small minnow baits, small twister tails, smaller than normal jigs, small crankbaits, and you can catch some of the biggest bass on some of those small offerings. You don't have to fish a giant swim bait right now to catch a bass. You can fish a small 3-inch swim bait and catch a monster bass. So don't be afraid to downsize and fish finesse approaches this time of year when the water's cool. Look for structure, pay attention to weeds. These fish are going to look for those areas and hone in on them. Bass like to focus on structure. Anyone that bass fishes knows that. It doesn't matter what time of year, they're structure-oriented fish. So look at structure, find green weeds, see if you can still find some weeds. How are the weeds growing? How are they blossoming? Where are things changing? And oftentimes you'll find where these fish are moving. So I like to look at spots where it's the gnarliest clumps of weeds during the summertime, stuff that you look at and go, ugh, it's just matted up. It's just a jungle. Oftentimes those spots will hold bass right now. The weeds are not there yet. They're not jungled up. It's not a forest, but the bass are there because they like that bottom content. That substrate is really comfortable for fish. It's a fishy ecosystem. We've all seen those kind of spots, wood-ridden shorelines, wood-ridden channels, where maybe in 2 months from now, you might not be caught dead going in there because it's just scummy and nasty and stagnant water and too hot. Oftentimes you can find your bass right there when you can start to fish for those fish in the springtime months. Water temperature, again, becomes a critical factor. I'm always paying attention to water temp. The warmer water provides more fish, just like we talked about for crappies and bluegills. Don't think that's not a factor for bass. So make sure you're paying attention to water temperature. If you do not have water temperature set up on your screen, oh, come on, go into your options, adjust your overlay settings, and get water temperature on both your console and your ball electronics. And pay attention to water temperature. It's important this time of year. And keep note, pay attention to that stuff. What worked, what didn't work. I bet you a lot of money that right now, these fish are going to become water temperature driven, both panfish and bass. So pay attention to water temperature. Longer casts. This is something that's oftentimes overlooked. We want to run around and look for fish. The water's clearer in the spring. We haven't had the algae blooms. Things aren't dirtied up. You may want to back off some of these fish and make longer casts. Watch some of these guys and gals on television. They're throwing chatterbaits. They're throwing jerkbaits. They're throwing square bills. They're making long casts and catching fish on the end of their cast. They're not punching heavy cover. They're not flipping that kind of stuff. They're making longer casts at some of these fish because the water's clear. The fish get maybe spooked a little more. So long casts become more important right now. Let me make sure I'm not missing any questions. I don't think any are coming through. If I'm missing them, I sincerely apologize. I think I'm staying on top of the questions, but again, I'll try to get back to you if I haven't. So longer casts, super important. Water clarity is a big thing this time of year. Good sunglasses for a number of reasons. This isn't about fishing. This is about eye protection. Hooks hit in the face. I make my kids wear sunglasses in the boat. I love it when my clients have them on when we're guiding, and I have oftentimes said, did you bring a pair? If not, I have extra pairs. It's a safety thing. But this time of year, a good pair of sunglasses allow you to see what's going on. Not only so you can catch the fish and understand what's going on right now, but you can see and you can plan for what's to come. You may see spots right now that you want to come fish in a month, in a week, in 2 months. So this is a great time of year to scout, to plan, to play around the boat. So just because we're talking about fishing and catching fish, don't think that you can't spend this time to still look for the productive spots. So look for spots that may hold fish all year long. You can see where the rock boulders are right now. You can see where these fish are probably going to hold in the summer when the water gets really warm. Some of the best spots in the summertime for me are spots I find right now and over the next month or so, because I can see where these gravel spots are in the weeds and I'll mark them. Because guess what? In a month or two from now, I can't see those spots. The weeds are flourished. I can't see them as easy unless I'm really paying attention to my electronics, but I can actually look at these spots and get dialed in and find out what they're doing. So good pair of sunglasses can go a long way. I wear a pair of Costa Del Mars. I can see in the water. I can see everything I need to see, and I can better prepare myself for a better day on the water, not just today, but for the entire summer. And again, yep, good question. Aaron, Make sure the glasses are polarized. Excellent. So you want to make sure you have a polarized pair of sunglasses. I like a pair of green mirror glasses. Seems to be the most trouble or foolproof for me for a variety of situations. I do have a few different pair of glasses I may change depending on sun conditions, but I like the amber green mirror lens. That one's awesome. I can see in a variety of situations with that, and away you go. So no, good point there, and make sure everything's polarized. And last but not least, respect the spawn. You know, just because you can legally target fish during the spawning season doesn't mean you always. Maybe you should. So if you see fish actually in the action of spawning, let's all practice, some patience, some composure, that we don't pester these fish. So I'm not going to get on my soapbox on this topic. We all have the ability to go fishing, and I'm not saying what you can or can't do in a legal sense. I'm just saying respect the spawn. If they're out there doing their thing and you can visibly see that, don't blow through them with the bait. Maybe back off them, try a new spot, and go from there. So respect the spawn, that's important. That goes for all types of species, even when the bluegills spawn and all that sort of stuff. Preserve our fishery, and we'll have better fishing to come. So, all right, moving on to some of the presentations I like to fish for bass. So you'll see a bunch of stuff. I like to fish a variety of different presentations for bass, and it's kind of all over the place. Again, I talked about vibration and noise. That's going to be key during these cool water periods. Something that makes noise, something that has a paddle tail, something that thumps. We're going to go through some options like that. Impulse reaction strikes. A lot of times these fish are sluggish, like I said. So you want to do something that kind of gets their attention, gets them to bite. Don't want them to think about it. They're not going to be staring at things for a long period of time. Get them to react on a bait and act accordingly. So you're going to see some of the baits I'm approaching do a number of things. Paddle baits, paddle tails, swim baits, that sort of stuff. Great time of year to throw some of those things. I use a lighter hook or lighter weighted jig that I might use during the summertime because I want to be able to fish some of the shallow water. I don't want it to sink to the bottom like a rock. So I'll work it in a little slower, and that's where the lighter jig comes into play. So think about the size and the weight of the hook and the size and the weight of the jig you're fishing, because that can make a difference on how fast it falls down and where it can hit. So make sure that's important. I like to fish a lot of chatterbaits. I'm not trying to beat a dead horse. If anyone's watched the Bassmaster Classic or follows any bass fishing right now, chatterbait's king. But I've been catching fish on chatterbaits ever since they came out, and I catch fish on them from now until the coldest day in the fall and all summer long. It's a very easy bait to fish. It's a great bait to fish. It's a great bait to fish if you're just getting involved in the sport of bass fishing or just learning to fish, something like that. It's a good hybrid between a jig and a reaction bait. You can cast and retrieve it. You can put it on a spinning rod. So chatterbaits are catching a pile of fish, and it's a great option to fish right away here in the springtime. Jerk baits. I like to fish a lot of jerk baits. I like to, Brian's asking, do I use a leader? That's a good question. If I am, I'm using a tieable leader. I'm using like a Cortland tieable wire. If you go to a fly fishing shop, they sell this stuff, or if you Google it, I'm sure you can find it. Cortland tieable wire. You can get it in 10, 15, 20-pound test line, and you can actually tie this. And I'll use that with a chatterbait at times if I know I'm in pike-infested waters where I guide. Pike are everywhere. If you don't like 2 and 3 pound pike, don't come anywhere near the Twin Cities, because that's what you're going to catch a lot of times. But if I'm strictly fishing bass and I know I need to catch bass, I may fish like a 14 or 17 pound fluorocarbon and just fish that and tie direct to my chatterbait. But yes, you can certainly use tieable wire for chatterbaits, and it'll save you. Trailers on chatterbaits, absolutely. I'm always fishing a trailer on my chatterbait. I think it gives it profile, gives it added vibration, gives it a lot more appeal to these fish. It can add some level of scent. And I'm using a paddle tail, whether it's a Kitech, whether it's a Yamamoto, whether it's a 4-inch Mr. Twister Sassy Shad. I'm using something like that. I may also even use a creature bait with bigger paddles because it gives you a different vibration, a different feel. But yes, I'm definitely adding a trailer to my chatterbait. And I go through all trailers. You can super glue them on there and hold them on there tight for sure. Otherwise, I'm going through trailers quite often. But yes, I would add a trailer to your chatterbait. To me, I feel like it catches more fish. It gives the bait that added oomph to get those fish to go. So yes, excellent question. Back to jerk baits. Jerk baits are awesome, and I can really hone in on some certain spots. I can slow the bait down. I can pause it. I can get to shoot different directions. I can get that impulse reaction strike out of these fish that I like. So jerkbaits are fun bait to fish this time of year. I can fish in shallow. And man, when you get fish wired in a jerkbait bite, it's super fun to fish. And you can fish a jerkbait again. If you're not an expert on a casting rod, bait casting rod, you can throw a jerkbait on a spinning rod. Absolutely. You can throw anything I'm talking about on a spinning rod. And that's a common question I get when I coach my son's bass fishing team. They're all 3rd to 8th graders. And I coaches our two kid team. They don't often use bait casters. In fact, most of them never do. You can catch just as many fish on a spinning rod. So if that's what you're comfortable with, get out there and chase it down. So you can fish those on a spinning rod as well. All right, Jerry, let's see here. What did I miss? Oh, it's sunny. The weather has a lot to do with fishing for bass. It's cloudy. They were hold tight to cover. Absolutely. Good point, Jerry. If it's sunny, they move out. Good point. Good question. Or a good statement, I should say. So, all right. Now, moving on, we got wacky. Got to go wacky. You know, wacky rigs still continue to catch a pile of fish. Super easy way to catch them. You can really fish it slow. You can add weight. You can fish it weightless. You can add a weed guard. You can do a number of different things with the wacky rig, and it continues to catch a pile of fish. If you're struggling to catch fish and you know they're there, I oftentimes tell my kids, switch to the wacky. It gets them to go. It seems to get them to bite every time. If they don't bite a wacky, if you see a fish and you cast a wacky in front of it and that thing just slowly falls and dances in front of their face and they don't eat it, I don't know. Move on. Come back to that fish in an hour. It's probably not hungry right now. It's probably not going to take anything. I fish a variety of wacky baits. I fish the pocket fry from Mr. Twister and the Cometa. I love both those baits. The pocket fry is going to be a little smaller. It has the dimples. It's actually the one you see on the screen. I like that bait. It gives it a different action in the water versus your standard Senko type bait. So wacky rig, great way to catch fish. A lot of fun. Super cool. I would encourage you, if you don't fish a wacky rig, which you probably all do, that it's something you definitely have tied on, especially here in the springtime. Jigs and finesse jigs. I throw a twister tail a lot in the springtime, even for bass. Everyone thinks, oh, that's a crappie bait. That's a walleye bait. A twister tail will catch fish all year long, springtime all the way to fall. So I'll oftentimes throw a light wire jig head with a twister tail, like a 3 or 4 inch twister tail, and I'll catch a variety of fish. I can fish that in shallow cover. I can fish it weedless. It's amazing what you catch in that twister tail if you just want to go fishing. Put 8-pound fluorocarbon on a rod, tie up a twister tail, and go casting. And you can catch a variety of fish, and it's a blast doing it. So don't overlook a twister tail. In terms of jigs, I use a finesse jig. I'll use that finesse jig from All Terrain all the time this time of year because it's soft, it's subtle. I can get fish to go on it. If I do need to fish and really pinpoint cover, I can do that. I can fish it on a weed line. I can fish it in heavier cover. So that's kind of one of my go-to baits if I am going to be around heavier cover this time of year. Or let's say more weed growth, I'll fish a finesse jig, and I'll throw that around, and it's a great way to catch fish. And like I said, don't be afraid to throw a finesse jig on a spinning rod. I got all the kids throwing them. Spinning rod will catch just as many fish as the bait catcher, like I was mentioning. Crankbaits, lipless crankbaits, square bills, great way to catch bass this time of year. You can bomb cast. We talked about casting far, long casts. You can bomb cast that lipless crankbait and that square bill quite a long ways. So it's a great way to catch fish. And I'll tell you what, if you get fish wired on a crankbait bite, it's tough to beat. And you're not setting the hook on these fish. You're just reeling them in. When one bites, you're turning your body. You're just letting the leverage of the rod, leverage of the fish, set the hook. And I'm oftentimes throwing fluorocarbon, a 12 to 14-pound fluorocarbon. I might even fish like a 10-pound braid. Why would I fish a braid, you might ask? Because it's super thin in diameter. I can throw it a country mile. It cuts through the weeds, and it dives down faster. So this time of year, I'm probably fishing a fluorocarbon. In the summer, I might fish a braid because I can get that bait 2 to 3 feet deeper. So if I'm throwing a DT16, I can get that profile bait down not just 16 feet, but sometimes 17 feet, 18 feet, 19 feet on a longer cast. But this time of year, I'm probably going to fish a fluorocarbon. And then, of course, the Ned rig. Everyone knows the Ned rig catches a pile of fish. That's okay. The Ned rig continues to catch fish. If you're not fishing a Ned rig, you're probably not catching as many as you should. It's super easy bait to fish. Doesn't need a lot of education. Doesn't need a lot of skill or expertise. You can fish a Ned rig with the best of them, and it catches a pile of fish. So let me check and make sure I didn't get any more questions. When do you start throwing top water? Excellent question. And what tips do you look for? I've caught fish on top water right away in the springtime, but generally I like to wait till the water gets into the 60s. When they start to move up for the spawn, That's when you can maybe start to catch them on a top water. Otherwise, I throw top water a lot in the summertime when fish are around heavier cover like lily pads, weed lines, maybe around dock lines. When they start to stage on what I would consider more of their summer patterns, then you can throw top water. I mean, if you want to throw top water, let's say a small prop bait or a spook will catch fish right now because you can get it to really walk the dog, move back and forth, and it can change direction. So you could definitely throw a top water in the form of like a spook or a popper right now, something that's slower, something that can be fished not as aggressive. But I generally like to throw top waters either in the summertime, or if I'm fishing, let's say a river section, a backwater where there's some current, even in the spring, you can throw a top water. But I'm not quite throwing top waters yet. I try to wait till the water temps get into the upper 50s, even the 60s or warmer before I start throwing top water. But good question. Top water baits are phenomenal. I always have a frog tied on for the kids. If you want to see kids get excited, have a bass blow up on a frog on the end of their line. It's something to watch, and it never gets old. So good question. Top water baits are a fun way to fish. All right, what else do we have? Any more questions here? All right, perfect. So we got a lot of bass presentations, a lot of options to get out there and chase down fish. Do I use a spy bait? You know what? I don't fish a spy bait a ton. I played with them a little bit when they first came out, and it might be a confidence thing for me. So I have thrown a spy bait. I'm just not probably that great at it. I have my set ways on how I fish, and most of the time when I'm fishing, I'm taking clients fishing. So I'm generally trying to hone in on spots where it ends up being quantity versus quality. And I have them throwing jig worms, I have them throwing jigs, I have them throwing wacky rigs, I have them throwing chatterbaits. But I will throw a spy bait from time to time, but it's not probably one of my go-to baits. Maybe it should be. Maybe it's something I'll play with more this summer and get better at. But I have thrown it a little bit, sure. But something you probably want to add to the arsenal if you're a bass guy, gal, and you're geeked out about it. Spy baits are cool. They're fun. It's a fun way to fish. It's a new way to fish. And I'll tell you what, we're being pushed hard in the bass market with all these new techniques and tactics. You have all the different types of rigging scenarios, whether it's the Nico, whether it's the Tokyo rig. You're always learning something. And that's something I probably should have put in an earlier slide is the learning aspect. I would encourage you to get subscriptions to these magazines, these online chat boards, and learn. You can learn what's new, what's the latest and greatest technology, and become a student of the game. And I'm always doing that. I'm always reading books. Ask my wife. There's always a magazine sitting on the mantle. I got my kids looking at stuff, circling things that they want to learn about, and then we talk about it. But yeah, that's something to look into. Is definitely get a membership to some of these bass magazines, and you can learn about some of these new techniques that I'm just touching the tip of the iceberg on. But a great way to learn as well is to always be a student of the game. All right, so here's another thing I really want to hammer home on. Memory is key, especially in springtime. And what I mean by that is I'm not going to hit you hard with take notes, but it is important to always remember what's going on because things are changing so rapidly fast in the springtime. I think our most aggressive pattern is that spring pattern. That's when things change the most. And if you're not out fishing every day, which let's be honest, really none of us can do that. None of us can just go fishing every day, all day, and really understand and become very intimate with the transition and migration patterns. So you have to remember what happened. You have to remember what the fish did last. You have to remember how they correlated to those water temperatures. And then you can use some of that information, if you remember it, by marking spots, by taking notes. You can remember in future years what fish did on certain bodies of water and how it changed. So you may fish today, and then you might not fish for 4 days, or you might not fish for 2 weeks. You'll be amazed at what can change in 4 days, let alone 2 weeks. So memory is key. Mark waypoints, mark where you found fish, mark where you found certain pieces of structure, mark where you found warmer water. See how those transition areas change. Find how the water changes day after day after day after day. So you may have found 52-degree water temp here on Monday. You might come back on Friday and find out at that waypoint it's now 54 degrees or 57 degrees or 60 degrees. And hey, warmer even up shallower. So pay attention. Record trails. Look at where you fished. How did you approach this, let's say, piece of structure when you were out here last? Did it work? Did it not work? Was there certain spots on this piece of structure you caught fish, and why? You can record your trails on all of your various electronics and come back and see how you fished it before and learn from not just successes, but failures. So record your trails. Weed growth. How did things change? It didn't look like this when I was out here a week ago? Well, it probably didn't. Things will change as water warms up, and you'll see the weed growth change. So pay attention to that sort of stuff. Bait fish. Were there bait fish in your shell? Holy cow, the bluegills are here now. I've seen it all the time. Oh, the bluegills moved up. Well, guess what? So will the bass. So if you go up into shallow water, main lake shallow water right now, you're probably not seeing many bluegills. The water's not warm enough for them to be up there yet. But if you come back in a week or 10 days, you may see a bunch of bluegills and go, aha, take note. These fish are going to start to move in. They're going to start to make some of the migration movements. So pay attention to that sort of stuff. And again, always circle back around with your angling buddies. This is the networking aspect of things we talked about earlier. Call your buddy and say, what worked for you? Maybe you went to Lake Minnetonka on Friday and you got your butt whooped. That's okay. We don't always catch them, but you can always go back and ask your buddy that. Maybe it was on Minnetonka the same day and he may have whacked them, and you can say, what did you do? What did you do different? What should I be doing different next time? So keep an eye on that sort of stuff. So pay attention, network with your buddies. That's super cool. And then last but not least, readjust for your next fishing trip. If it didn't work 2 days ago, maybe try something different the next time you go out. So don't be afraid to readjust, suck up your pride, don't get stuck in a rut, and readjust for that next fishing trip. So memory is key. These sorts of things are super important. Good comment. Aaron says, don't be afraid to ask pros questions on social media. Absolutely. I encourage everyone. Like I always say, if you see me at a sports show, come ask a question. If you're at an event or a function and you see some of the guys or gals you look up to that you admire on television, or maybe you read papers of, or maybe just a local pro or expert or guide, ask a question. Most anglers are approachable. And if they're not, with all due respect to the anglers out there that are not approachable, you shouldn't be in this promotional game. You should be approachable, be willing to answer questions. I'm not telling you to pull out your phone and say, here's the exact waypoint and where you catch them, but no, help anglers catch more fish. So that great piece of advice, don't be afraid to ask questions. I'm always willing to answer questions. I may not always have the answer, I have no problem saying that. So ask the questions. Excellent feedback. All right. So a lot of great resources. I had a lot of fun talking to you. I probably got long-winded. It's been over an hour. I probably could talk fishing until midnight, believe me. But I really wanted to give you some resources here, some things so you can go on your own and plan. For starters, the chart viewer, like I talked about on navionics.com, you can go there and you can plan your trips. You can play along. All the screenshots you saw, just screenshots I gathered from my laptop. I can go on there, I can zoom in, I can zoom out, I can look at satellite images of certain spots. It's amazing what you can learn by looking at it from that perspective. So I can go on there and I can look at different pieces of structure. I can go on there and look at back channels that I didn't know existed. You may find back lakes you never know existed. So look at some of that stuff, use that as a resource. Your Navionics app, your phone, get your phone out there. It's amazing how many things you can learn from just studying lake maps and using some of these tools. YouTube pages. Navionics has an extensive YouTube page where you can go on there and see all these various videos. They archive these webinars where you can go back and learn things, watch other webinars, hone in on your skills, find different topics. YouTube has become the most popular search engine, especially and absolutely for anglers. If you have a question on how to tie a knot, type it in, pull armor knot, boom, you have a video on it. Ned rig, Matt talking about the Ned rig. What the heck's a Ned rig? Type it in, boom, you got 80 videos on it. Chatterbait, how to retrieve a bait, all these sorts of things. Use YouTube at your fingertips. Check out the Navionics YouTube page. Make sure you subscribe to them so you can stay up to date on all these sorts of things. The Facebook, the infamous Facebook. You can go on Facebook and be a part of groups, find all kinds of stuff. Navionics is doing Facebook posts all the time. You can follow them for the next webinar, what they're speaking about. Follow them, like stuff. You know the drill. You can find me on mattjohnsonoutdoors.com. You can go to my website. I put a lot of content on there, videos, fishing tips. You can find out more about some of the stuff I love to use. You can find me on Facebook, on my MJO Facebook page, just MJ Outdoors. You can find it, type in Matt Johnson Outdoors. You can't miss it. Ask me a question. I'd be happy to. I'm always checking my messages. I'm very active on social media. I enjoy it. I feel like it's part of my job to give back and help educate. So if you have questions after this, by all means, please ask. And I'd love to have you do that. Obviously, your local DNR office, Lake Finder info. There's so many resources out there that we underutilize to catch more fish. Don't just hop in your boat and go to the lake. Be prepared. If I can leave you with anything from this webinar is be prepared. You have the tools to do it. Don't waste time trying to figure out what to do next. Have that plan in place before you hit the water and you'll catch more fish. So we went through it quick, make sure I didn't miss any questions. Thanks, Craig. Appreciate it, buddy. And I'm sure I missed a bunch. I know there was a pile when I started clicking, so I apologize. Hop on to Navionics Facebook page. It's probably the easiest way when this seminar is over to get some questions, or hop onto my Matt Johnson Outdoors page. I got a variety of topics started pertaining to this webinar, promoting it and getting people excited about this. So ask a question on one of those, and what I'll do over the next 24 hours is navigate to those specific topics or posts, and I'll check and I'll see what's going on, and I'll try to answer the best questions I can. So otherwise, thanks a ton for watching. That was my first webinar. This was a blast. I'm sure I'll do another one for Navionics, and I'll probably even do one on ice fishing. Hopefully this fall, get people excited about ice fishing. I have the best seasons here in Minnesota. I can ice fish, and when I get bored of that, I can open water fish. I can target just about everything you can think of. So we're pretty spoiled here in Minnesota, the Midwest. And for everyone down south, be safe. And with everything going on in the world, be safe. Have fun out there, catch some fish, set some hooks for me. And I want to see some fish pictures. Get out there. Have a good time. Catch them.